Hello YouTube and welcome back to The Zone. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an awful long time since I've last done this, but hopefully by the time this video gets actually just one second there guys. Just let me get everything right. Let me just check how that's gone. Let's just hope it's not slanty. Yeah, I think we could do well with that. So anyway, like I was saying, if by the time this video gets put out, I would probably have finished off every single Chris Ann series, and then I'll probably be moving on to a whole bunch of other stuff, possibly the other parts of the Chris Chan documentary by Gino Samuel, but that's still a long way off. What we are now, the 8th of May 2020, and this is all, ladies and gentlemen, a part of RageCon, like I promised all of you. And let's just get started, shall we, with Chris and gender. And we start off with a quote from Chris. "When I feel like totally grossed out with even an image of a penis, and recalling and focusing on a vagina image in my mind usually works." So Chris, once again, and as always, he is so utterly revolted by the sight of, a penis that he will mentally substitute it for a vagina, which, to be honest, I don't know in what scenario you're going to what exactly happens when he has to image a penis in his head. I'll leave that to your guys' imagination, not mine. Similar to the topic of faith and the topic of mortality, which I think I've done faith before. I haven't done his mortality yet, but given what I've talked about with his health, probably not very much longer. Chris's actual beliefs on gender and how it is classified are more complex than his stated beliefs, mostly because his beliefs are so paper thin that, in fact, I'm actually going to go on a limb and say that if his beliefs on faith are paper thin, then I'm going to assume his views on gender are going to be about as thick as a week-old soup, and how it's classified are more complex than his stated beliefs. For someone so preoccupied with gender identity, Chris displays a staggering ignorance of how either gender typically behaves, and his views on both genders are extremely warped due to him taking the stereotypes he has presented with him in television and music at face value. I mean, I don't want to say that's one of the most destructive things you could do for a person is literally them being... And this is one of the biggest dangers when it comes to Chris is his gullibility. The fact that he'll just believe whatever it is. But then again, I'm actually going to pose a question to this, and I was going to make a whole thing about this, but I don't think Chris is as gullible as sometimes he appears to be. Why? Because who's to say that over the years, and even on the people on Twitter who are saying that Chris should jump off a bridge, well, why doesn't Chris jump off a bridge? Because who knows, there could be some people saying that the dimensional merge will occur if Chris jumps off a bridge, but astonishingly, Chris does not do it. So it says to me, and there's got to be other people who've said for Chris to kill himself before, it shows to me that Chris, of course, does have some kind of common sense that, he knows better than not to do it. So you could take that what you will, but that's just a little thing I wanted to do. And Chris gets kicked JPEG. This is Chris's views on, again, is almost his nutshell opinions on gender, and I'm going to try and read this, but his handwriting is so appalling. It's as bad as his art in many respects. Christopher Weston Chandler, he refers to himself as his actual first name here. "You goddamned bastard. You of all the people in my entire life have royally destroyed and dishonored my own name." So apparently Chris is self-acknowledging that he is the one person who destroyed it. That's like giving a low blow to yourself, which is exactly what's going on here. He's giving a low blow to himself. "And dishonored my name. Your reckless disrespect of women has ruined all lives on this earth." Well, it hasn't really destroyed my life, but it's reinforced my opinions on, this is not what to do. But then again, I can never ever tolerate or even forgive your sorry as hell asshole. I am too beyond ashamed I've ever given to you. Okay, right, I don't. And apparently this, we all know he didn't drew this in the year 2000, but he meant to say this to Kristen, blah blah blah, in the year 2000. And apparently his testicles go crack. Then again, with how much Chris ejaculates, it's probably fair to assume that his testicles are literally covered in a chrysalis of dried up semen. And with that out of the way, let's move on to the first part of today, females. Chris repeatedly asserts his reverence of women, and seems to have comparatively glowing opinion of them, stating that he finds women empathetic. But, as stated at the beginning of this article, the truth is more complicated. While Chris has always preferred female friends, and is known to be far more accommodating of lesbians than gay men, even going so far as to identify as one himself, in truth, Chris has a distinctly sexist view of women. Based on his failed attempts at getting girls at the mall, Chris views females as hypersexual, preoccupied with shopping, given to conserving with others for hours, and fixated on getting married and having children. This is highly evident in his female characters in Sonichu. As a matter of fact, in Sonichu number 9, he referred to women as another species. Now, I'll get on to the other stuff here in a second, but I just want to say right now, given with the way I think it depends on like the context of whoever the hell was saying that, and did Chris mean that as just someone that was so difficult to figure out? Because I know, maybe that's giving Chris again a little bit too much credit for what it's worth, but I'm going to assume like he must have some, he must obviously realize that that's just not a very nice thing to say. But then again, Chris flip-flops with his morality so much, it could easily be more than likely that is the real thing. Also, one thing I wanted to ask is that he's stated before that he wants to be a house husband, stay home, play with his children while his wife, his sweetheart, goes out to work and provides for everything. Chris just wants another mother figure. It's just so. And besides, the reasons why Chris actually wants to, have children is, it's a very shallow and a very, very pointless one because, well, okay, you know what, I'll lay down the law right now and just say exactly what I think. I did this experiment, right, when I was doing my screenwriting course at university just over 2 years ago, and one of the things we were taught was that when you're wanting to write characters, you have to do a want and need sort of argument. For example, a character wants this, but what they need is this. And with Chris, I half feel as if like the thing I want to tell him is that Chris wants a daughter, but what he actually needs is not to have a. Well, okay, I'll tell you what. I'll be a little bit more simpler in this. Chris wants love, but what he needs is to love himself. He needs to develop some kind of self-respect for himself and realize that being more confident with himself before he starts to, venture elsewhere to seek, a romantic interest is far more healthier for somebody like Chris than actually spending all of his time trying to find a girlfriend. I'm just going to say that much, and I might come back to that in a few videos' time. This seems to be a hyperbole, but considering Chris's abysmal knowledge of the sciences, it is difficult to be sure. His Rosechew character, who is a living embodiment of how Chris believes all women behave, has a personality. It always starts with that, and with people saying that a personality is what they have, which consists solely of the traits listed above, which is considered ironic as Chris constantly tries to show Rosechew with a passion for women's rights, despite trying to portray them as being equal in power to their male counterparts. Chris rarely depicts Rosechew's fighting, more often simply leaving them on the sidelines of a battle to wail like damsels in distress, even when their boyfriends are in mortal danger. Even outside battle, they tend to be little more than organic sex toys for the Sonichus. Again, by the time I actually get to doing the reading the Sonichu comics, I'll have a lot to go into that. But then again, and Chris has stated this before, Sonichu is supposed to be a children's comic. Again, make of that what you will. Males, my main article jerks. Yeah, and listen, I'm going to possibly say that if Chris has no clue about, how to treat women, then I think his attitude towards males is going to be equally as sad, to be honest. Chris has harbored a deep hatred for men, despite being one himself, ever since his teenage years, because he was bullied in grade school, largely because of his bloated ego. Well, bloated is ego. I don't know, I don't think he was ever really that big as a child. I could be wrong about that, making him extremely annoying to be around. Not to mention the fact that Chris is known to fly into fits of jealous rage whenever he sees a more successful man than himself, especially if that man is getting some and he isn't. This gradually blossomed into a general distaste for masculinity traits such as body hair. Indeed, in his nudes, it is apparent that he is surprisingly meticulous in shaving his body hair. Certainly compared to other aspects of grooming. He also has stated, as shown in the video, a disgust for topless men, and encourages men to wear muscle bras so he doesn't have to see their nipples. I don't. What even are you supposed to say to something like that? So, well, it's a good thing he didn't say that. Actually, I don't have anything better to say about that, so let's just move on. He even made a now somewhat outdated short list of the men he doesn't consider jerks, which include himself, his father, and Santa Claus. Well, okay, of course he wouldn't consider himself a jerk. That's just not rectifying and solidifying his ego argument right there. Since becoming a tomgirl, Chris's misdandy has not abated. In recent years, he has variously referred to men in general as barbarians and Neanderthals, which, coming from him, are rather ironic accusations for a number of reasons. Let's just see if there is meant to be a number of reasons. Branch Lane Court, no burglar will want anything in this house. Almost being modest. Chris and health. Okay, that's just a whole number of things. Now let's move on. Transvestism and transgenderism. And we have this lovely image of Bob lying almost half dead among a pile of garbage whilst trying to drag Lucy down to hell with her. This article or section is oversized. Okay. Main article, transgender. It has been speculated for a long time that Chris has had gender issues. Well, I did another thing where I talked about that, where I felt like, again, somebody just put something in front of Chris and he took it at such face value that he just went with it. In 2005, he created Crystal Weston Chandler, which is widely believed to be a result of his autogenophilia, the fetish of seeing oneself as female. In Christian Weston Chandler's future message, he mentioned that you should try out the opposite gender's What? You should try out the opposite gender's toys while keeping your original gender in mind. Possibly indicating that he may have been in denial about transgenderism long before becoming a tomgirl. He also wondered what he would be like if he were born a female. Sorry guys, my mind's just a little bit, I'm more confused. In fact, actually, I'm just going to put it like that. I'm so confused about what the hell. Again, and I'll you know what? I'll bring it back to what I said about him and his gullibility. It's like a light switch. He could turn it on and off again, just whenever the hell he feels like it. Unfortunately, and to terrible repercussions as a result, because the implications arise that apparently you can play with other toys, but you still have to be the gender you were assigned with. In April 2011, photos leaked by Surfshark Tito showing Chris dressed in women's clothes. Soon after Chris announced he was a tomgirl, Chris being a... Actually, somebody might have to help me out here, but did Chris announce he was a tomgirl before or after these photos were leaked? Because it was the only way to possibly, Chris being a tomgirl has resulted in him wearing feminine clothes. A brief attempt at piercing his taint, I've covered that twice before, we are not going back there, and growing long hair. Well, I mean, technically I am as well, but that's only for the lack of any barber because of COVID-19. So, whatever. The last time actually I had hair that was about as long as this was nearly over 9 years ago. Despite this, Chris still rigidly maintains he is attracted solely to women. Well, to be honest, there's nothing wrong with that, but whatever. There is still speculation as to why he has done this. Chris may have believed that joining the female community would aid in his love quest. Possibly that... Sorry guys, I'm literally trying to think of why he might possibly think that. Which, naturally, it hasn't. And indeed, any sensible person can see that identifying as a lesbian actually shrinks his pool of potential sweethearts, given that lesbians are a minority group, also pretty much female. However, Chris, I mean, dude, I could freaking call myself a lesbian right now, and that would not mean anything. I would still be... I don't get just... Actually, I'll say this much. If there were people out there actually interested, because the only example I can actually think of at the moment is this great British comedian called Eddie Izzard, who is also a transvestite. However, he is he's actually a very key figure in politics, and among other things, he actually has a family of his own. He has a wife, he has kids, and it's just all part of the show. It's show business, and there is no business like it. So, but yeah, that's the only real example I can think. But then again, Eddie Izzard has far more charisma, he has far more charm, and he is not creepy, unlike Chris. Like, I might even do a whole video where I go over Eddie Izzard in the future, but yeah, because Eddie Izzard, like, he's a guy I've actually not heard of for like I've not seen him for like nearly 12 or so years, but I do know about the things that he's done. Let's see. However, Chris has recently made several telling statements that indicate he believes that he can use his gender confusion to his advantage. For example, on various... But that just shows to me that Chris is more of an opportunistic son of a bitch than, somebody who actually does struggle with these things. Chris has made several statements to the effect of him being called compatible with all women. As opposed to what? Or that he can go any way a woman desires. I don't get that either. Statements like these show how he believes that by identifying as female while remaining biologically male, he can appeal to women of all sexualities, although it remains unclear that if this is his main reason for cross-dressing, or indeed whether it was a premeditated reason for it at all, merely an idea he came up with later. However, being transgender does not stop him from prejudice against other transgenders. Exactly, it's the same thing when he's talking about, autism. He has absolutely no problem with himself being this, but he has a lot of issues for people who are transgender, and people who I mean, I heard that in the recent Geno Samuel video, I think it was like part 36, he called somebody out for being gay and actually going through the gender reassignment, even though Chris said he would never do that, despite, wanting to, self-hypnosis himself into growing a vagina, which in just about every single instance I've just listed shows that Chris is delusional, ridiculous, and insane. I didn't really want to use insane because I think insane is actually a very specific term, but yeah. However, being transgender does not stop him from prejudice against other transgenders. During his quest against Jeff Francine, who is also trans, Chris calls her a pretty little lady man, a he-she, and even Mistress Jeff, showing that even years into his transformation into a tomgirl, Chris is still Chris. Yeah, again, I've touched this before when I was talking about transgenderism, and again, I came to the conclusion that if I would, irregardless of who I decided to be, whether or not I was male or female, whether I wanted to call myself James, Joe, Jolene, Jasmine, if I wanted to call myself anything like that, I would still be the same person on the inside, not on the outside. So this is just another example about that. Preferred pronouns. In 2014, Chris came out as a lesbian-identified male. I'm going to assume the smallest minority group of them all, before identifying as a trans woman. After transitioning, Chris adopted the name Christine to accompany his new gender identity, along with the corresponding personal pronouns. In 2019, Chris updated his Twitter to reaffirm his gender pronouns. Also, I am female. Please address and talk about me with the correct pronouns. She, her, hers, thank you. Which, tranny pride worldwide. Chris calling himself a derogatory term for transgenders, 14th of August. Yep. Likelier than you think, Dice is scum, and that is so uncanny with how they've done that. Given that Chris lacks basic English skills, it shouldn't be surprising that he has trouble navigating the linguistic minefield of transgender, transsexual, transvestite, intersex, bisexual, hermaphrodite, and his own tomgirl. For someone who hates mislabelings, he sure is sloppy when it comes to these labels. On his OkCupid profile, when asked, would you date a transgender person, he replied, yes, as long as she was born female and was still female or a tomboy. Oh my god. He told Jackie that the fact that he loved wearing women's clothing did not make him a transvestite. He told gal pal Rebecca Bentley that his unclit made him bisexual. Did it? Did it really? When he meant intersex. He promptly flipped his shit when Rebecca asked if he wanted to fuck dudes now. All of Chris's claims about sexuality or gender identity need to be viewed through an autistic filter. Or, I don't really want to say filter, but more or less an interpreter, which, again, as someone being autistic myself, I'm trying to at least half try to work out, but there are some things I can try to decode, but there are some things that I refuse to acknowledge because of how, not just of how ridiculous they are, but the fact that trying to defend somebody like Chris in certain amounts of arguments is just not worth it. That said, Chris has spent many years struggling to articulate his position on transgender topics. In the early years of trolling, he confessed that he was uncomfortable with the idea of transgender people, and made it clear that he was not sexually attracted to them. I have been given thought about the transgenders and transvestites. I do not feel comfortable with them. Dicks are dicks, and I do not care about them except for my own. Fair enough. Well, not fair enough, but he wrote in a January 2009 chat. He later reiterated, "I do not care much for transgender people or hermaphrodites, but I do not discriminate them as individual people," even though he just did. That's called hypocrisy. Blatantly in the middle of a sentence. Chris must be the only person in history to be a hypocrite in the exact same sentence. He flip-flops in the middle of a sentence. "I would never care to have sex with a hermaphrodite." Classic Chris, 15th of January 2010. Literally 16 days before I was to turn 12. That's just... And this is Chris as the male intersex transgender. Yeah. Yet somehow he could not let the issue rest. When Bailey J introduced herself to Chris in a mailbag letter revealing some naughty selfies, Chris's initial reaction was completely phobic at the sight of this hermaphrodite. Later, though, after Jay let Chris know that he had hurt her feelings, he reached into his shallow well of empathy. "I can relate to how you feel sometimes. I wonder what my life would be like if I was born female instead, because of some of my emotional, caring, self-conscious thoughts I had in my lifetime. Then I would later remember that God must have made me all straight males for good... Then I would later remember that God must have made me all straight... have made me all straight male for good reasons." It's a pity God didn't decide to give Chris the gift of, basic grammar or proofreading, anything. Or any sort of sense of conscientiousness at all. Maybe even a conscience as well. Maybe anything that, God would have actually liked to have given, anyone. When Chris looked at this beautiful woman with a large pickle, he saw a distorted reflection of himself. He was not yet ready to abandon his straight male identity, though. Oh, does he? After becoming a tomgirl in 2011, even though he was still officially a heterosexual and proud to be male, some of his words and actions betrayed a deeper gender confusion. He started using women's restrooms. He told Jackie that he fantasized about fitting in at a lesbian bar, where he believed he would have no trouble seducing a lesbian and persuading her to bone in lesbians. Oh, for God's sake. With my dick in her vag. Okay. First off, I don't even know if that's... I do know what he's talked about, but also I don't even think in that sort of position with a male and a female that's entirely possible. Although no, I'm not gonna... I'll have to reference my Kama Sutra possibly after this, but I'm pretty sure that's not how that works. In December 2013, he confessed to Rebecca, "I wish I was born female." Actually, you know what? Whilst we're on this subject, I just want to ask myself, and because this has possibly happened, but where would he even think about going to find a lesbian bar? Also, it would probably just... What makes Chris thinks that he would solely be the only one trying to get in there to try and, pull a lesbian? I half suspect there would have been plenty of, perverted males, dressing up, being transvestites and trying to worm their way in there. I know fine well that's probably... They're not opportunistic as Chris, but, there were other people in this world who are opportunistic and not just Chris, so... I don't know. I would only assume there would have to be really... The security must have been top-notch in places like that. Hopefully. He still seemed unsettled, especially since being a tomgirl wasn't working to attract a sweetheart/soulmate. On the 14th of August 2014, he came out publicly, although as what exactly wasn't certain. Given his garbled and inconsistent vocabulary, the initial announcement was that he was a tomgirl intersex of female soul with male body, and a tranny cross-dresser. Apparently, unbeknownst to Chris, intersex is a chromosomal condition causing ambiguous genitalia and can present in many forms. none of which appear to be true to Chris. Then he said he was a lesbian-identified man and a cross-dressing tranny. 2 weeks later, he was telling Catherine that he was a lesbian tomgirl transgender male, but also 3/4 woman. By September, he seemed to have settled on lesbian. You know what I think I should have done? I actually should have gone, I actually have a really, really good friend who is also a lesbian. And I actually know a lot of people within the transgender community. And I genuinely wanted to ask them what they actually thought about this. Because I can absolutely guarantee to you that one of my friends in particular, I won't give any names whatsoever, but I can guarantee that this individual not only has much bigger bollocks than Chris or even I will ever have, but I can absolutely 100 guarantee that not only will said individual put the biggest boot up Chris's arse. Well, actually, I would, because you know what? I reckon if I was, if I was actually transgender, or if I was, gay or bisexual, I would feel a lot more just, you know what? Forget that. I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. Lesbian transgender, a female lesbian soul trapped in a male body. A lot of these just sound super, super convenient to any of Chris's scenarios. In April 2015, apparently no longer a man, he changed his Facebook pronoun to she and his name to Christine. This month also saw the beginning of a flurry of Facebook likes from all sorts of progressive transgender issues, such as restroom choice and gay marriage. Whatever he was certainly proud of it. And wasted no time trying to persuade his new LGBT personal army to wage war against local managers. Little did they realize that, again, it's I don't really blame the people. They probably had no clue who Chris was, and that's probably just how it starts. Does Chris want the operation? Almost immediately upon being discovered, Chris revealed that he had been giving a lot of thought to contingencies which might require him to lop off his duck. In 2007, he told Meghan, "If I ever stoop down to changing my path, i.e. becoming a homo, I might as well would get a gender change operation." He also made it clear to anyone who asked that he was literally nauseated by the sight of his own penis and all other penises. It might even seem self-evident that lesbian transgender Chris would be eager to undergo sex reassignment surgery. However, in his intellectual discourses on transgender controversies, Chris has expressed some ambivalence in a February 2009 chat when asked if trans women would go under the knife. Chris replied, no, no. And also, I'll tell you this, and if I ever have a transgender child with both sets... What? With both sets of genitals, I would raise that child to be a boy. Chris, apropos of nothing. I'm not even sure, again, that entire sentence made absolutely no sense. Jesus Christ. I know fine well Chris went to, high school, he went to university. And I know fine well he actually did get a diploma or some degree in that, but unfortunately, when you're seeing all of that, you really do begin to realize whether or not Chris had any sort of education at all. If this is actually what he thinks. Unfortunately, given the fact that Chris's almost completely unfiltered mind, well, it's not so much an unfiltered mind, it's an unfiltered mouth to say these sort of things, it's probably more than likely that he's not joking. And you know what? What's strange is that out of all these articles I've done, being presented with stuff like this is, I'm so now numb to how ridiculous Chris is and these sort of ideas that I'm not even shocked or surprised, which I admit is pretty ridiculous on my part because, yeah. He similarly told a troll impersonating transgender porn actress Bailey J, who also hadn't asked, that if I should ever have a hermaphrodite for a child, I would raise that child with the mentality of a boy/man. For a long time, these were puzzling statements. Given his hatred for jerks and all manner of pickled cucumbers, all of his own gender identity mutated. However, Chris revealed his reasoning in early 2014 on his OkCupid Q&A. He was faced with the question, imagine you have a newborn child whose sex cannot be determined. I don't think that's entirely true, but okay. A risk-free surgery performed immediately could provide normal male or female sexual and reproductive function. Okay, few things. One, risk-free surgery. I don't particularly think that seems really... It can't sound that risk-free if this is... If a new sex was being introduced. Also, I'm going to go on a limb here and say that if such a thing would happen, I'm going to say they possibly may need more than one operation for that to happen. That sort of thing would have to go under years of, just like, possibly like estrogen pills or goodness, like, or possibly like having to go to a professional every couple of weeks and such to monitor the progress, especially if they were going into puberty. Like, how exactly would that sort of thing take place? A risk-free surgery performed immediately could provide normal male or female sexual and reproductive function. Which would you choose? Chris's answer was, do not perform the surgery. He added, if a hermaphrodite, I would raise it to be male regardless, since it would not have any eggs anyway. Plus, big bonus for him, in sex with all women, lesbians included, I would imagine. The best thing I could say about Chris exemplifying the wisdom of Solomon. Yeah, I bet. The best thing I could say about something like that is that Chris is doing what he's always done, being honest. However, that's not really a good point either, because given what Chris has said about Chris has done apropos of being honest in the past, has half resulted in the things that have happened in his life. Not all of them, but just... When exactly did this? In early 2014. Okay, so 6 years ago. I just want to say right now is that, I just would like to bring up the point again that he always wanted a daughter called Crystal. Okay, so daughter, so I would hardly imagine why he would even... To be honest, if he had a child and turn out to be male, I doubt he would have given it much attention anyway, because he always wanted a daughter, kind of like a reverse Henry VIII. In fact, actually, when you think about it, Chris is almost the modern day Henry VIII, a fat, obese slob who demands a child of a very specific gender, and then just it unleashes a reign of terror against anyone who gets in his way. In other words, these were two obstacles in the way of Chris losing his dick. First, a sex change operation wouldn't provide him with reproductive organs, since, as a woman, he would not be able to give birth to Chris personally, which is his true fantasy. He must first impregnate someone, as I love the fact that actually going into detail about how, reproduction works, because Chris doesn't know this, as many times as necessary until the appearance of his God-promised daughter. He can't adopt because Crystal must come from blood, tears, and seminal descent. I'm wrapping this up. He criticized fellow tranny Ohuvia, whom he incorrectly believed to be Jack Fideus, for trying to have the operation, claiming that he would definitely not be considered any at all a woman whatsoever, because he would not have a uterus and he would have no reproductive organs. I mean, I want to have children someday. Obviously, he don't. In late 2014, he could not persuade a sperm bank lesbians on a message board or his friend Renee to serve as the vessel for... What the... So for now, its purpose unfulfilled, the ugly growth must remain. The second reason he can't get the surgery is that the dick is an attraction sign. As much as he loves to crow about being a lesbian, Chris wants to be open to all women, straight, bi, and lesbian. In a May 2015 Facebook Q&A regarding the operation, he was equivocal and wrote, "I am exploring making the best of this body for any woman born with a vagina. If he wants to be everything for everybody, he will need to hold on to that duck." It should also be noted that Chris doesn't have a fucking clue about how sex reassignment works. In June 2015, he posted an advertisement on Facebook. "I deserve to be a full woman with a full functioning vagina. A, blood type, if anyone wants to put up the money and trade." As with most things he wants, Chris prefers to sit on his fat lesbian ass and wait for a magical transformation of my body from male to completely female. Not that Chris would afford sex reassignment, as it costs thousands, if not more thousands of dollars. While Chris struggles to pay his basic bills and spends what little he does save on frivolities like trips to BronyCon. In Quickville, before his slide into fandom, Chris used the intersex character Sylvana to symbolize the evil trolls. The evil Count Graduan told her, "I am going to grant you with the power to transform like a ditto. My price is that you will have to relinquish your ability to give birth, and you will be upgraded to have both parts. So, with the biological upgrade complete, your years of training can begin." She proceeded to seduce and horrify the tranquil community. After Chris modified his gender identity, Roby Sonichu also became a tomgirl, and later a fully fledged male lesbian. His/her transition story is a major part of the plot of Sonichu number 11. In May 2015, he confirmed that comic Chris was also a lesbian trans woman, and retconned Chris Chan Sonichu as a D-cup female with a uterus and ovaries, possibly to be renamed Chrissy Chan Rosechew. Then, though the power of his imagination, Chris managed to impregnate himself with a turkey baster and gave birth to twins. This scenario is probably as realistic as Chris ever getting to a handle of his own gender. Actually, we could take this down as Chris in the comics as symbolic of his struggle against the repression of not being able to attract a boyfriend-free girl. Symbolic of his struggle against reality, more like. Yes, I've used that joke plenty of times before, but it's still a great one, and it applies to Chris in every single aspect. In Sonichu number 11, colossal Chris Chan learns of his future self's identity and reflects on it, reasoning that he is not fond of partaking in brutish things. Following his meaningless destruction of the 4-cent garbage building and subsequent murdering of several inhabitants, his battle with Mary Lee Walsh, in which he permanently paralyzes her with lightning-based weaponry, and his then retcon execution of the Aspedigia 4, Chris then magically starts transforming into a voluptuous woman. a sequence inspired by artist Miss Mako and her collection of gender-bending videos. To him, transitioning is a technique that simply requires his epiphany and ancient powers to immediately turn into a fully fledged woman. On the 6th of December 2017, Chris confirmed in a Facebook post that RoseTube was in fact male at birth. Jesus Christ. Just, this is so convoluted. Like, Sonichu is already as convoluted as any work of fiction could possibly get. I mean, people give J.K. Rowling a bad time for, retconning things on posts on Twitter, but this is just really pushing it. But had her genitals changed during a sex operation before the events of Sonichu number 8. He suggested that this backstory would be explored in the Sonichu 15 retelling of her and Sonichu's origins. However, he was extremely uncomfortable with this announcement. You mean he wasn't uncomfortable with anything else he said, so, oh wait, of course he would do that. And deeply in denial of the revelation which he seems to believe came directly from the fictional character herself. Again, because Chris thinks all these characters are real. In reality, the idea to make RoseTube trans probably originates with the idea guy, and its status as Sonichu canon is likely provisional. Non-binary genders. I really do not know how many genders there are, but I am not and do not judge. Have a good day. Chris believes on non-binaries. If I'm actually, if I was to give my own opinion, I'll say, and this is purely my own opinion, so, take this as well as you want. Personally, as far as I'm concerned, there were only, as far as I'm concerned, 2 genders. That isn't to say that nobody else can't believe that, but as far as I'm concerned, there are male and female. I'm not saying I wouldn't respect anyone else's, but you know what? You gotta stay true to what you believe in, and it's just one of those things. And again, I mean absolutely no disrespect to anyone else who believes in that. It's just what I know and what I agree with, and I don't necessarily think it's altogether that bad. And again, don't try and get into arguments about stuff like that. It's just you could do much better things in your time than argue. So that's just that. I think I'll just leave it at that. Given how complicated of a topic gender is to tackle, especially today, well, I kind of just I made my opinions in less than a minute. People will tend to argue about what classifies as a gender, and therefore some people might argue that there exists more than 2. In Chris's case, believing everything he sees without giving it a second thought, also concluded that there really are more than 2 genders, simply looking at a Facebook post about how Facebook is allowing their users to identify themselves as 58 different genders. So apparently there's meant to be 58 genders. Well, actually, 2016, I'm going to assume there'll probably been a lot more added to the list. That might even be something to look at, possibly, just out of curiosity, because again, learning more about the world is a one step closer to being less arrogant or less ignorant. But then again, if if it doesn't harm anyone, then it's absolutely okay. Taking it to mean that there are in fact 58 genders. The next month, Chris is interviewed on the same topic and is asked how many genders there are, and simply says there are 58, all because of that same. Didn't take him much to change his opinion then, did it? In the comic, Chris, already conflicting with his own gender identity, also decided to give his avatar in the Sonichu comics the same exact characteristics since Sonichu number 11. Once again, despite looking completely different from his real-life counterpart, decides to draw his avatar with the traits he's always desired, since becoming a tomgirl such as bigger breasts and wider hips, revealing very much of what kind of results Chris's wishes to simply get from watching subliminal frequency hypnosis videos on YouTube instead of saving up his money to get a sex change. Likewise, Chris decided to change his Sonichu form to a female Sonichu form, The only real difference between Chris's old form and his new form is that his newer form has added breasts, a functioning vagina, uterus, and ovum, eyelashes, the trademark female Pikachu tail, and the color of his shoes changed from black to white to turquoise and lime green. At this point in time, Chris Chan Sonichu's species is highly questionable, given how Chris never implied that this was his new form. In fact, a Rosechu, and instead refers to it simply as a female Sonichu form, and the character is still called Chris Chan Sonichu, even though Chris has suggested renaming the character Chrissy Chan Rosechu. Who cares? Just who cares at this point? It still begs the question as to why Chris hasn't decided to make his new form into a Rosechu form in the first place. Right, anyway, where were we? In the first place. Seeing how female Sonichus theoretically don't exist, and that Rosechus are essentially the female counterpart of the Electric Hedgehog Pokemon. Despite giving the character the new name and the more logical name, he never implied that he'd never do a redesign of the character itself to give it to Rosechu's traits, seeing as though the idea guys had convinced Chris and Rosechu was actually a dude when she was born. The chances of this happening are now completely no instead of very slim. Okay, so that's technically it when it comes to Chris and gender. Now, a lot of these things sort of like come back into what Chris has talked about when I talked about Chris and being transgender and also regarding his sexuality. But there was actually an awful lot beneath the surface that we could talk about and get stuck into, because if it's just, why does Chris still believe it was fated and destined for these things to happen? Was it fated and destined for him to say all these ridiculous things, to fall into these traps, was this really all God's plan for all of these things to happen to Chris and for him to act this way? Because even if like this is just, I don't even know like what the words are to really explain just to the level of Chris's arrogance on these sort of subjects. Like I could understand in one sense that Chris is only trying to be honest, that he's only trying to give his own opinions, and to be honest, when it comes to subjects like sex or gender, many people will come out, could and sometimes will come out with the absolute most insane and baffling levels of stupidity, but they could see as logical in their own little way. And again, it's not for me to say whether they're right or wrong, it's just what they think. Unfortunately, when it comes to Chris, the way he states the things and the fact that we know he's gullible, delusional, all those sort of things, it's almost very easy to assume that Chris just straight up does not know what he's talking about, or he will say some things that are really, really insensitive and still expects people to feel sorry for him. It's him, relying more on double standards and just saying stuff for the sake of saying stuff, and then changing his opinion literally at the drop of a hat, meaning that if Chris does have any opinions, that he will just abandon them the second anybody presents him anything else, which doesn't so much contradict his opinions, but they present a different argument entirely. The thing about, there being 58 genders, in which Chris changed his mind. Now, again, what I said earlier about I think there are only two genders, it's only because, for me at least, and because I'm not an expert on stuff like gender, it's easier for me to just simply say, well, they could be whatever they're like. If I want to call them male, female, I mean, what's going to happen? Are we going to start calling people triophilia, gender, or stuff like that? Is that what it's going to come to? Now, obviously, I don't think people are going to be that pedantic about it, because, listen, I'm pedantic, but there's nobody in history who is that crazy about stuff like crazy, or just that, well, crazy I think is actually the better phrase for this. So, I possibly might do a video about apparently what the 58 genders are. It's just, at the very least, it's me looking into the subject deeper, which is probably more than Chris probably ever did. It also just, the thing he said about, you know, going out with a, calling himself bisexual and then saying he would never go out with men. It's just, it's further proof that he does not know what he's getting himself into or what he's talking about. Which is, again, we've been doing this for like nearly an hour now, so I'll just leave it with this. This sort of thing should not come as a surprise when I know with what we already know about Chris. But I feel like it's more, I feel like it's really bad on my end for the fact that I am not like just saying why would he say that, because some of the things in here are just, he still thinks as though saying that he's wrong, saying that he's right on stuff like this is 100% wiping his arse. Again, although this wasn't anything to do, this wasn't people from the LGBT. This was not their fault that they started to, like, you know, support Chris when he came out as lesbian. Although, to be honest, that should raise a few flags right there. Lesbian identified male. But again, knowing about about Chris's past, about him being about as genuine as a blancmange and all the rest of it, it's very, very easy to come up with the idea that the second anybody tries to, you know, be supportive of him, he won't so much betray, but he will say something so incredibly deranged that you're just going to feel sorry that you decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. And that's just about all I've got to say about that. Okay, guys, that was Chris in Gender. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hope to see all of you guys again for the next reading. Take care. Bye-bye for now.